Hello, magical people. So today I wanted to quickly film my birth story. And I do have the little one with me here, so if you hear any snoring, grunts, groans, it's all him. He's very nose noisy. so, um, anyway, my birth story is I went into the doctor at, what was I, 38 weeks? And she was like, ooh, you're measuring like 2 weeks ahead of where you should be. And that's when they measure your belly with the measuring tape. And that you're supposed to be like, if you're 38 weeks, you're supposed to be about 38 weeks in measurement, or 38 inches, sorry. And I was nearing 40. So she was worried that a few things could be happening. The two major things that she was thinking would be I had too much amniotic fluid, which is something that does happen, or it could have been that he was getting too big. So she had me come in at my next appointment to do an ultrasound. And at this appointment, so I was 30, I think I was like 38 and 6 days, something like that. They do them every week when you get to the end of your pregnancy. So I went in and did the ultrasound, and they were measuring him at 8 pounds 6 ounces, and a very big head. So they were like, yeah, let's go ahead and induce you. So they set up an induction date for that Tuesday, and this was like, I think my appointment was Friday. Yeah, so I had like a few days to suddenly prepare, like, but he still could have come at any time. So she was like, still want you to walk as much as you can every day, and I want you to like try all the things that they say to try and get your labor going. So Joe and I did. I ate pineapple. We walked. Nothing happened. I was getting a ton of Braxton Hicks, but I've been getting them since the second trimester, so I didn't really think anything of it. They didn't feel any different. In fact, they might have felt less painful than they did during the second trimester, because I guess I was just used to them. Just like, this happens every day, all day, so oh well. So Joe and I made a plan. We were getting induced on Tuesday at 7 p.m. and you're supposed to call the hospital an hour before to make sure they can still take you. So that day we went out for lunch at my favorite Indian food restaurant, because we were like, when are we going to get out again? Who knows? And then they were like, have a large carby dinner before you come in, because you don't know when you might or might not be able to eat again, just depending on how it goes. So then we went out to Ippolito's, which is, I'm sorry, not Ippolito's, Dominic's, which is this Italian restaurant, and I got spaghetti meatballs, and the waitress was super adorable and super excited for us. And then we called while we were there eating dinner and asked, can we come in? Are you guys ready? And they're like, yeah. And so we drove to the hospital. We got there about a half an hour early, which was good, because we ended up having to redo all of our paperwork. Even though we had put it in already, the hospital had switched ownership, so we had to put it in for the new ownership. So I'm kind of glad we got there early, because by the time we finished all of that, it was 7:30. So then we got taken back, walked back to the room. It was not a bad sized room. It was kind of, medium sized room. And they were like, hey, go ahead and change, and we'll go ahead and get this induction started. And while I was getting changed and everything, Joe went ahead and started unloading the car with all of our luggage and the baby stuff, everything that we'd brought, which we brought a lot of stuff. So then they put in what they call Cervidil, and it's like, basically if you smooshed a Tic Tac, it's like that, and it goes up into your cervix, and then you wait 12 hours, and then they check you when your 12 hours is up and say, here's what happened, here's, how are you doing, all that kind of stuff. So they put it in, then they gave me an Ambien, had me all hooked up to the monitors. One was for his heart rate, and then one was to see if I was having contractions. And then like, okay, go to sleep, see you in the morning. And so I was like, okay. So Joe and I stayed up for a little bit, because it's hard to just go to sleep in a random place. And then I think at 10 we decided to try and go to sleep. So I laid down, but because you're super pregnant, you're not allowed to lay down on your back. You're supposed to lay on your side. So I like rolled to my side to lay down, and then he went off the monitor. So they came back in, they put him on. But like literally every 2 minutes he kept moving and he would be off the monitor. So they'd have to come in, bug me, do it all again. And then finally, I think at like 2 a.m., he stopped moving enough that he stayed on the monitor, and they didn't bother me again until the next shift comes in, which was at 7 a.m. So your night nurse introduces your day nurse, and the day nurse was like, hey, I'm whatever her name was, I don't remember. And she's like, I've been here since 82, don't worry about it, I'm a seasoned vet, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay, you know. And then she had this like really young thing with her that like was basically just out of school, kind of still training. And she's like, we're gonna be with you until this thing is over. And I was like, okay, you know. So, you know, she came in and checked me and took the Cervidil out. And I was, sorry, I'm trying to rearrange my hands here. And she said nothing had happened, that I was 0% effaced, no dilation at all. And she's like, I'm gonna have to get you a nurse, and we're gonna have to come up with a game plan. And I knew from doing my research that the game plan was put Cervidil in for another 12 hours. And that just made me want to cry, because I thought, what if I do this again for another 12 hours and nothing happens? Then they're going to tell me to do a C-section, and I'm going to have gone through all of that for nothing. I'm going to have gone through 24 hours for nothing. And so I was pretty upset. My doctor comes in and she checks me, and she was like, I don't know what that nurse is talking about. You're at a 4. And I was like, whoa, like a 4 is a big difference from nothing. So she was like, we're going to go ahead and break your waters and get this thing started. And that was at like, I don't know, maybe 9 a.m. So she breaks my waters. And you know how some people are like, oh, it's not a big deal, it's like a little trickle, feels like you peed yourself. Not me. I felt like someone had opened the floodgates. It was like a waterfall. And then every contraction that I had, that much more fluid would come out. And so they had to like change the, like, they put this like pad under you. They had to keep changing it, keep having me like move off of it, which is incredibly hard. So yeah, it was a ton of water, a ton of water. And then she was like, okay, see you in a couple hours. And I was like, okay. And then the nurse came in and she was like, do you want an epidural? And I was like, no, I'm okay. Like, I kind of was having to like pause and breathe through them, but it wasn't like painful or anything. It was just like I needed to concentrate. At least that's how I felt. So I was like, no, I'm good. I'd like to try and do natural. So that's kind of my plan, and I still feel good, so it's okay. And she's like, well, our ward is full. He may not be able to come back to you, and you're like already 10th on the list if I were to put you on now. And he's gonna be here an hour anyway, and like a lot's gonna change for you in an hour since they broke your water. And she kept going on, and I kind of was like, she kind of basically was like, it's now or never. So I was then like, I guess now, because I don't want to not have the option and then be screwed, so I guess. And Joe was kind of like for an epidural, because he was like, it's really hard watching you in pain, and I was like, okay. So I was like, you know, put me on the list. The anesthesiologist guy comes in like 10 seconds later. I mean, and we were not ready. Joe had just left to go to the bathroom, so I had to call him and be like, come back, I need you to be here, because they were like, we want your husband here with you. And so the anesthesiologist, like, I'm holding Joe's hands, I'm sitting there, and then he was like, I need you to curve your back. And I was like, okay. But he didn't give me any instruction. He didn't say like, do it this way or anything. And then he just like did it. He didn't say, I'm numbing you. I didn't hear any of the steps that I learned about. He just kind of did it. And what it is they put a needle in you to numb you, and then they put a different one that's hollow in, so they feed the catheter into your spine with that. And that, I could feel that, like, ow. It maybe hurt more than having him. It hurt. And I was like, whoa, like, so I got startled by the pain. Okay. And, and like moved my head, and he was like, don't move. And I was like, oh my God, like, there's a squirrel. And so I was like, I don't know what's going on. And that was like horrible, because he should have said, like, we're doing this step and we're doing this, and I don't know, he didn't, and it was horrible and it hurt. And then I was like, I felt like I regretted it, because I wanted to try and go natural, and I was expecting him to be there later when I was going to be in more pain, but oh well, I did it, it happened. So then, I don't know, maybe half an hour goes by, the nurse comes in and checks me, and she's like, oh, you're at a 7. And I was like, whoa, it's been like 2 hours. So I'd say like an 11, I was a 7. And she's like, okay, we'll see you in another couple hours. So Joe and I are like watching Dave Chappelle, and all the Pirates of the Caribbean movies were actually playing on the TV, so we were watching that and just hanging out, because now I couldn't move. I had a catheter in, I couldn't do anything, so we're like super stuck there on the bed. So then next couple hours go by, they come back, and I'm like rolled on one side, because they have this like peanut ball between my legs to help him like get as low as possible. And I'm like holding on to the edge of my bed rail, and I'm like really having to stop and breathe through those contractions. And then Joe goes to the nurse, well, her bag's empty, like, is that an issue? And the nurse was like, nah, not a big deal. And I was like, okay. I didn't know what bag it was. It could have been my antibiotics, it could have been a flu, I didn't know. So then she checks me, and she's like, you're at a 9, I'll come back in a little while and we'll see how you're doing. And I was like, don't go, because like I was feeling a whole lot of pressure, and I was like involuntarily pushing. I couldn't help it, I wasn't trying to do it, it was just happening. And I was like, don't go, I think that we need to like talk about it. So she checked me again, she's like, oh, you're at a 10. And I was like, okay. And she's like, why don't we do some practice pushes, and then I'll get your doctor. And so like she has Joe hold one leg up, and the little itty bitty nurse hold the other one, and then she's like, pick yourself up and curl around your baby and push. And so I was doing that for a while, but my contractions were 8 minutes apart. And so between every contraction, Joe would sit down in the chair and then get back up and have to re-get my leg. And by the time all that happened, I felt like, my contractions were waning, and I was having to tell them I'm having a contraction, even though they could have looked at the monitor and said like, oh, we see that you're getting ready to have one. I was like, oh, it's happening every single time. So both of those things were really starting to annoy me, because I was like, I shouldn't have to tell you when I'm having a contraction. You can see everything that's happening to my body. And I was laying flat on my back, and I just didn't feel like I had any power. I just felt like nothing was happening. So then she gets my doctor, and my doctor's like, between me and one other person, she had to debate on who to stay with to deliver. So she stayed with me, and we continued to push like that for a little bit, and then she yelled at Joe, and she was like, be present, be here, put your phone down, which I thought was hilarious. And then she like transforms the bed, because they can do all these things, and she puts up these not regular stirrups, but these are like L's that supported my whole leg, and then there's little handlebars on the end of the bed. So I held onto those handlebars and had my legs in these stirrups, so the guys didn't have to hold them anymore. And then finally I felt like I had power and I had control. So I did like 4 pushes like that, and he was out. And I had him in one contraction, which was 2 pushes. and I felt like, man, if I had just had this earlier, I would have had him a long time ago. So overall, I pushed for 2 hours, but like really had him in like probably 30 minutes because I don't think I was really doing anything before that. So, but at this time, I'm like, I can feel a lot happening as I was pushing him out and then all that stuff. And I was like, you know, people say that you're going to feel the pressure, just not the pain. And I was like, but I feel like a lot of it, but I didn't know. So then she starts stitching me up because, yeah, I tore a lot. And I don't know how many stitches I got. I don't know where they were exactly. But then she starts stitching me up and I can feel the needle going in. And I'm like, oh, you're on like my right side and you're putting in like the third stitch. And she was like, you can feel that? And I'm like, yeah, I can feel that. And she's like, oh, you're not supposed to feel that, as she puts in another stitch. And I'm like, nope, I feel it. So she put some like numbing cream on me and I couldn't feel it anymore. Then, you know, they put them on my chest, and at this point in time though, because I'd curled around and tried to do all that by myself for so long, my shoulders and my like arms hurt like I'd been working out for a long time, because basically I was, and I couldn't like lift my arms up to put them on him because I was so sore. So they like put him on me and they're like, oh, hold your baby, and I'm like, oh, okay. You know, and you know, they do the first hour with skin to skin, and it was great. He was 8 pounds 6 ounces. He was 20 inches long. He had a 14 3/4 head, which is huge. Most babies are around 12. And that 2 inches makes a big difference, especially when your epidural wears off right at the key moment. But it wasn't that bad. My grievances are that nurse, if she'd been there since '83, should have known that I was 4 centimeters dilated, and that the anesthesiologist didn't say the steps as he was going, and I should have advocated for a different pushing position earlier than it happened. But overall, I don't really count the nighttime as labor, because like I was asleep and like I didn't know what was going on. So from the morning to the time I had him, which was at 4:16, I didn't have a very long labor. I don't think. It was pretty easy, which I did not expect. When you're induced, usually it's really long, but I feel blessed, and he's here now. He's sleeping. Oops, that's my thumb. So anyway, that's my birth story. I'm gonna also have a hospital story, and then about my hospital stay, because that's a whole nother drama. And then I'm going to have like our first week, and then we'll be all caught up. And I hope you all enjoyed this. I hope I didn't ramble on too long. Have a magical day.